I go out for a walk into the southern part of Colombia, which made a region that is the more full of green and and forestry. I feel when I walk all Latin American skin in my skin. And in my body, there is a river that is generating all its flow. Sun from the highlands in Peru, Bolivia, cyan solitude, a green Brazil, and Chile with copper and minerals. I continue going up in the Americas. A full root of a cry that demands all the voices together, all the hands together, all the blood can be a song in the wind. Sing with me, people from Latin America. Free your home with a cry in your voice. All the voices, all the hands together, all the blood can be turned into a song in the wind. Sing with me, Latin American people. Free your hope with the cry in your voice. Thank you very much, Alejandro, for opening this session with this song, with this southern voice. The wind is also calling us to be here in this meeting, this marvelous meeting. And we thank you very much for being connected today in this webinar cycle of reaching hope in the transition in terms of harmony. And the topic today is the environmental democracy and the Escazú Agreement. So to continue with this, we're going to welcome Martina Romero, Secretary General of Patricia International, so that she gives some key speech, and if she reminds us of the purposes and what is the process and why we are here together. So go ahead, Martinez. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Angie. Welcome and good morning to everybody. Bring your hope with a voice, and that's what we have been doing this for webinars and the previous ones. In general, for those of you who have not attended other webinars, the main objectives are that go up to November. The first thing is to give visibility to the voices of, magnify the voices of communities that accompany the members of the task group related to extractivism, to see what are the challenges and the achievements regarding conflicts with extractives in this in terms of transition. Yeah, to strengthen the analysis capacity and the tools for the defense of the territory. And the third objective is to promote actions of solidarity towards affected communities and promote advocacy with co-parts and allies in Europe and North America. Today, we have a purpose of promoting the topic of environmental democracy in Latin America. So the idea here is to know a little bit about the communities. The three objectives are first, to know cases of communities that have promoted participation processes with citizens to defend human rights and the rights of nature from the extractivism. The second one is to understand the advantages and the challenges of the Escazú Agreement for environmental democracy in the region. And the third one is the promoted the right to information, participation, and justice in environmental matters, additional to the protection of life and environmental defenders. From the same methodology, we have people who are experts in the topic and testimonies in the communities. Finally, I'd like to invite you to think about this of environmental democracy. Latin America and the Caribbean is the most unequal region in the world, according to the standards of the United Nations. The notion of equality that we are promoting is referred to the equality of means of modes of living, income, and the quality of education, or access to housing. It also has to do with the equality and the access to rights to and autonomies from the territories, and gender, racial equality. So we have two possibilities when we talk about democracy. The first one is the convening of R2s and the Escazú Agreement, but the region adopted their own instrument for the instruments of access for this. So even though we could have easily have had access to the Arthur's agreement, the Caribbean and America decided to create its own instrument. These two agreements offer an infrastructure, a legal infrastructure of the right to access to information, to participation, and to justice in environmental issues. But these regulations do not guarantee the full guarantee of respect for human rights of the states. That's where the civil society voices and the popular and NGOs to guarantee that these regulations are effectively a reality. So welcome everybody to this moment that is ours for reflection, for exchange, and for further action. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, querida Marta Inés, por estar aquí abriendo esta sesión.
Thank you for opening this meeting. It is very indicative that today, September 13th, we're having this fifth meeting today on the environmental democracy in Escazú, and it is 2 days away from the day of democracy on the 15th of September, since the General Assembly of the United Nations decided that this would be this special celebration, this commemoration on the 15th of September, and that was born in 1997 with the Universal Declaration on Democracy adopted by the Interparliamentary Council in 1997. And these two declarations, what they try to do is to commemorate and celebrate democracies, to highlight the importance of citizen participation, equality of human rights, and democratic values. But it is interesting to check that these two dates do not have any reference to environment. However, as both are promoting the human rights, it would be interesting to just call your attention to the fact that in 2001, the human right to a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, and this is recognized as the right that makes possible the other rights. So we cannot have the other rights if we do not guarantee the other rights. So this fifth encounter is very indicative, and the time also mentioned by the singer at the beginning with the song, and then with Martinez. It is really important to knit the hope of democracy with your feet on the ground and with the heart on the earth. And Escazú is a special call in that direction as a regional agreement. The first one regarding environmental agreements with the protection of human and environmental right defenders. What tries is to implement the Principle 10 of the Rio in 1982, and that starts with the following declaration. The best way of treating environmental issues is with the participation of every citizen interested in the level that applies to them. And precisely to learn a little bit more about this, We're going to be talking about with other leaders that we have invited today, and to learn more about the lessons learned and their activities that they have developed on how to implement this search for environmental protection from their own community learning. So I'd like to welcome our first case, our first experience that comes from Ecuador in the voice of Juan Bay. And we welcome you, Juan, for your time and for being willing to share today. He's from the Auran nation, and he's going to share one specific case of resistance and promotion of environmental democracy in the Yasuní and Choco Andino. So Juan, thank you very much for this being here today. And we're going to have around 20 minutes to share with us your reflections from that community voice that you have. Please go ahead. Now, the floor is yours. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody. My name is Juan Bay. I am the leader and president of the WAORANI Nation. We are the last one with contact in the Amazon area. We had an initial contact with all the civilizations 60 years ago. We share territories with other peoples, indigenous peoples that have decided on their voluntary isolation. And in the issue of environmental defense and defense of nature, it is also important to tell you about the critical situation in the world that we're going through. Well, we don't guarantee the right for indigenous peoples. It is really useless or impossible to guarantee the rights of nature. I need to remind you that before calling a state, in Ecuador, we were created under a resolution on the Yasuní National Park that is being exploited by a state company, Ecuador. It's an oil company. 10 years ago, the indigenous peoples, Guarani, began to work and they were not really familiar with the kind of fights that the indigenous people have been carrying out. So you must understand that every country has its own government, and that those governments are associated with the development of a country, and they are trying to look for places to see how to get more resources. So the Yasuní National Park was recognized as one of the most complete in the world that has, and in this territory, it's inhabited by the WAORANI peoples and some other peoples that are enjoying self-isolation. I'm sorry, there are some interruptions that are due to internet access. A year ago, we started with a fight for the defense of nature and the defense of the environmental rights. After maintaining a historical fight, the WAORANI Nation, on the 20th of August of 2023, with the addition of the Ecuadorian people, the Yasuní people win with a 58%, so that the oil is under the subsoil and is not extracted from the national park in Yasuní. So after this approval, the people began to be organized, and on 20th of August, they began with a popular consultation. And unfortunately, there was no willingness to fulfill that requirement. So that the 20th of August, the government organized a committee by 5 people in the government that including the Finance Ministry, the Ministry of Environment, the Secretary of Women on Rights, and I can't recall the other one. And what they try to do is that we have to remember that this is an ancestral territory, and the state it continues to vulnerate the rights, the right of the original people to participate in decision making. So our organization began to promote, and the NAWE, in an international summit in the Yasuní, the Ecuadorian Amazonia, we began to work began to work together with other NGOs and regional and local governments to build and to put together a roadmap for the defense of nature and environmental defenders. As I told you, we have had 60 years of contact with civilization. Our people have been isolated and surveilled by the oil company. And when I began my term as president, I began to evaluate and monitor the territory. The Waorani, there are 2 million hectares that it is recognized for 800,000 hectares, and to be recognized around 1.7 million hectares, additional hectares. When we evaluate in our territory, our territories was being surveilled by many organizations, oil companies, and also religious groups like evangelists, etc. The people were divided and we were controlled by territories. Please remember that the Waorani people is only one language, one country. So under that context, we began to position the ideas and our fights, and that was new for our country. And when we say in our territories, we're going to decide how we want to live there and what can happen and cannot happen in our territories. For many years, our defenders of territories and defenders of nature were not paid attention to, but with the when the issue here is when an indigenous leader is called an environmental defender, it becomes a little bit conflicting and it's confusing because sometimes it generates internal conflicts among the people. So I am defender of people, I am defender of my house, I'm defender of what is mine, I defend what is mine. But sometimes a little bit confusing when the specialists and the communicators begin to talk about that one indigenous person is an environmental defender, and when you want to participate in the territory, what indigenous people say, you cannot defend the environment, you have to defend us because we are part of life. So there are many aspects that need to be decided in the territories, and what it is more convenient for each one of the peoples. Yeah, because our Guaranis, we have been defenders for many years, protectors of our home. We are not invading, attacking or affecting nature. But 60 years ago, because the Guarani began to connect with the civilization, and the government began to see that there were possibilities to take advantage of our territories based on that contact with the civilization. We were, before that, we were isolated, but also surveilled. Since then, the Anawe, the Maori nationality, decided an emergency status because we have felt that our territory is being invaded by oil companies, timber, and other actors. So our nation, we have been working in our territories to say, these are the borderlines. We have indigenous people. This is a place where we have been settled for many years. And if you need to have any kind of activity, you have to receive permission. Under that context, in the summit, I was sharing this with the NAWE, when they have the international summit on the roadmap for, we began to address the following issues. First, the popular consultation or community consultation so that the government can fulfill completely the total closing of the Block 43 and environmental reparation and social reparation to the Waorani nationality, because it is not only enough to control or to turn off the machines and the platforms and the old platforms, but it's also to see what we can do and how can we do to reforest all this area that was destroyed by the government and by the oil companies. Why? Because we, in our country, we have had a constant fight with the other indigenous groups that are in voluntary isolation. And what we're doing is we are protecting your territories, but we are not only protecting we're not protecting only the people. We're saving life for the people who are living in that part of the territory. There are women, white people, jaguars. It's been a historical fight to the Waorani nationality, and in the summit we presented a document to the court so that the court can insert the technical part of that we created with NGOs, governments, etc., local, national governments, and instances. Why is it that we don't want to have oil exploitation in Ecuador, but in the whole of the Amazons? Because we have understood, the Waorani nationality has understood that having oil companies in the territories simply has brought poverty, has brought changing cultures, diseases, and death. So we have said, Waorani, we're going to make the decisions of how we want to live in our territories. We will decide what we want to do in our territories. We have mentioned to the other government that please let us live, because it's the way we live. Because if today we don't guarantee this just and collective right, what is going to happen with the next generations? And we understand that there are some court resolutions on indigenous people in Ecuador, where they guarantee aspects in the Constitution, but sometimes it is very complicated to be able to make the government listen to us, because what they really want to do is to increase the income for the country. They don't really care about the indigenous people's rights and the nature's rights, because the only thing that a human being that is collapsed with diseases, what we're looking for is dignity and pride of the present. They don't see, or they don't have in the roadmap the defense of nature and the defense of the people who live there. Because of course we understand that we have a lot of things that are written in the Constitution, the protection of nature, but very few countries actually fulfill that mandate. So we're fighting to defend the right to defend nature. The indigenous people are persecuted and threatened and sometimes killed. Today, I am a refugee in the Waorani people because I have been threatened to be killed by the oil company. I'm in a place that my family doesn't even know where I am. I am working from home, and precisely that's for the work that I'm doing now, because in 60 years, nobody has been able to claim the rights, because as we mentioned, we are a country that has a recent contact with civilization. Our grandparents never went to school because the government does not have presence in our territories. Sometimes there are people coming to our territories, and the people, the indigenous people, have mentioned that no NGO, no oil company has talked about protecting our rights. So we are actually setting a stepping stone in the Amazon, because that's the way to work. In a democratic decision, our country has decided that oil does not mean change or progress. The world and our country has to understand that we need to guarantee and save the world, because we're talking about climate change and the problems that we are facing. So the indigenous people have been the protectors of nature, the protectors of territory, because we have not protected this because of money or in exchange for anything else. We feel that this is part of our lives. And sometimes the government, the power, the political power do not evaluate this, or do not take into account these things. So this is one of the concerning issues that we are going through in the Ecuador, and that will be like our summary. A week ago, the government in Ecuador and the oil company promoted two communities, a Quechua community and Waorani communities, to confuse people, co-opt and divide the people. They moved this community to a province near the capital city, and they generated a brutal accident. 8 Waorani people were killed in the accident. And the Kuuri, which is something that we call like somebody who is from our territory. So we had 9 people killed. Because of those people, they began to blame, to generate that their own organizations were to blame because of the accident. And because we are leading these important changes in 3 provinces. So we began to receive threats by the delinquents that have taken over the country. And some of them, so I had to hide away, and I am now hidden in a place where we are working from work, and this is a really concerning situation that today I cannot walk freely my territory, to continue working with my people and to continue positioning the rights. And as mentioned before, this is one of the problems that we face, and the indigenous people suffer because of the fact of raising our voices. So we have made it very clear that if you want to enter into our territories, you have to ask for permission from us, so that we make them aware that they are right and we are making them defend our place. In a matter of time, and NAWE is working really hard in defense. This is very important. We need to understand this. Indigenous peoples, as I mentioned before, have defended for many years nature, but in exchange for nothing. Today, we cannot just stay in the jungle. We need to take a step further, and we have said the activists, the NGOs that come here to talk about the protection of nature, they have to change their point of view, because we have asked consistently. So we're going to defend not extractivism, but what are we getting in exchange for protecting nature in terms of health and education? Well, there are no other mechanisms for protection. what happens is that people will work directly with the communities and they begin to take advantage. They co-opt the communities, they divide the peoples, and we are asking them to reflect that in order for us to be able to defend the territories, we have to be united and we need to guarantee the rights of the communities too. Apologies because there are some interruptions due to internet access. So what we're saying is that if these other people come here and we don't stop them, they will destroy nature, they will destroy our region with extractivism, and they will affect the rights of indigenous people so that the indigenous peoples can continue guaranteeing their territories. And in that way, we can also give visibility to this. This is something that is really important, and that NAWE is working on that. We are not against anybody. We are not against progress. But if people come here to affect our nature, but if they're going to guarantee our well-being, because we cannot be isolated, because our kids need, and new generations need to go to a school, they need medicines, because this is not for free. We need to pay for that. So somehow we need to continue working, and it is really important to keep all these elements in mind, because all of those things get together into what we talk about, the defense of nature. Why do some indigenous people work with mining? It's because of need. Sometimes they don't have the income to guarantee health and education for the kids. So this is something that we need to see from an integral point of view. And I thank you very much to be able to share, although it was a little bit quick because of time. Because what we're doing is we're trying to defend our people. Thank you very much. Thank you, Juan. And I would like to take advantage to thank you on behalf of all of us who are attending this space and the members of organizations, to thank you for all the work that the Waorani people, what the things that we are teaching us, and for the call that you say today, that there is no defense of the earth if we don't guarantee the life and the rights of people who are defending the rights of nature. So we renew our appreciation for the work that you've done. And we are concerned about your security issues, and we are going to continue working with human and environmental defenders, because without them, there is no possibility to begin to really work with the protection of nature. So we're together with you in the idea and the purpose of protecting. Please receive a huge hug to you and to the people, and we will continue to extend this solidarity and the care of our territories, of our shared house. A huge hug to you, Juan. Thank you very much for sharing this in this space. And to continue knitting these reflections and working in this topic now, we go to a case in Guatemala, and we welcome Patricia Gregorio. Patricia Gregorio. She's an authority of the Chinca Parliament in Guatemala, and she's going to share with us a resistance and promotion of democracy regarding resistance of the Escobar mine. Patricia, welcome. Thank you for your time and for sharing with us in this space of solidarity. Please, the floor is yours. We have 20 minutes, and you will see the screen so that you can take advantage of the 20 minutes. So please turn on your microphone. It is closed at the moment.
Ahí ya estoy. Sí. Buenos días para todos.
It is a pleasure for me to see you today here with the technology, because we can express the things that we live in our territories. Juan Bay from Ecuador, the same actors the laws, the regulations against us. So the only difference is that here in our territories, in 20 minutes, it's really difficult to tell you of the whole history in a summarized way. I'll mention 3 points. The first one is that when in our territories, we have the mining companies, the one that is called El Escobar. They came with tricks to buy our lands, offering a lot of money for the land. And so the people in San Rafael de Flores, where the mining company is located, got crazy with the prices that they were paying at that moment, the mining company. And they came with a huge lie that they came here to, they wanted to plant tulips. But in our territories, there is no space for tulips. We have maize, bean, chili, sugarcane, tomato, and maize. And there is a little bit of livestock. So there is no space for tulips. But at the moment, we didn't know that it was a mining project that was entering our territories. And unfortunately, people from other countries, like a priest who already died, Fernando Bradio and a priest from Spain, realized that what they have really began to do was a mining project. They began to spread the word, and they gave us information that this was a mining project. At that time, the priests called us to a walk to San Rafael de Flores, and we called it the Flowers Walk. And everybody had a flower in the hand or a bunch of flowers or something that had to do with nature. And we put it at the main gate of the mining project, a mountain of flowers. Around 10,000 people participated in this march. Well, the company said that that it was beautiful, but that they didn't know is that further ahead, we received training, and we had our first popular consultation, where 96.86% said no to the mining project in our territories. Here in Santa Rosa, and I'm talking about from a municipality, it's called Nueva Santa Rosa. It was the first municipal consultation at a national level that was made in our territories. There were other consultations in other towns, and there were some like good faith consultations because they didn't want their mining project in our territories. So we had a first consultation in 2011. In 2013, when the business began to, we continued demonstrating, but at that time we stopped offering flowers, but there were masses of people. It was a massive demonstrations and blockades almost in front of the mining project. And because the state at that moment was always corrupt, they always supported the mining project. They would send the anti-riots police people, and there were people killed, other people arrested. And there was one of our friends in this part of my face where I'm painting, and they destroyed the nose, almost like 4 molars, and it was an order of the general manager of the manager of the private police in the mining company. So we continue with our fights, fighting against the mining project. We started in 2010, so we've been fighting for 14 years now. There has been criminalization. At that time, The president was the president Otto Pérez Molina, and he was a military person. And the state minister was also military. So they wanted to finish with us. Unfortunately, a morning at 2 a.m., they attacked us where we had the blockade. At 2 a.m., it is against the law. But we knew that this was not police from the government, but it was a police hired by the mining company. So they attacked us physically and verbally. Some of our women were actually one of them was raped because she was demanding her rights, and a man, a private anti-riot man, who wait with a very offensive word. And so he sent her this women police, and she grabbed her breast and she pulled her. It was basically a raping what she that they did with her body. So the mine has divided the community because there were some people in favor, other people against it, and the mine is paying a lot of good money so that people can work with them. So people get so happy, and they turn against us when we are defending our territories. We're defending our shared home. There are some water bills. Oh, sorry, there were some water sources, and around 16 water wells or fountains. These wells have going down 100 meters, polluted waters already. We have cyanide with lead and other metals. I don't remember the names. Young people are dying of kidney insufficiencies because the waters are polluted by the mining company that is located in our territories. The second point that I wanted to share is that a group of partners decided one night, 7th of June of 2017, to have a picket that is 16 at the moment. We are going to complete 7 years of the place that we were, and we didn't allow material to move into the mining company. Of course, this brought a lot of problems. That night, 9 people led that march. We didn't allow we didn't allow them to move material for the mining company. It was 11 trucks, huge trucks with materials for the mining project. So it was on that day or that day. So we asked for help and to be able to communicate with people when we were in danger. We had the bells in the Catholic Church. I don't know, but there's mortars, and basically there are like little bombs that make noise. And there was another way that we were in danger. The bells, and so the whole of the population went down to the place where the Pacific resistance in these 3 cities, the 3 municipalities that we are resisting in that place. People got very happy. We resisted, and no material was allowed to pass whatsoever. That generated issues with the owners of the coffee shops and stores, because then there was no oil, there were no materials for them, and so we had an invitation to all the gas stations, and we restricted the fuel because the way the gas stations were selling the fuel for the mining company so that they could continue to operate, and the business continued to buy the fuel to those stations. So they ended up with Extreme to hire a helicopter business and move with a fuel tank hanging from two helicopters with a huge danger for all the people that were present there, because one of those tanks could have fallen and would have killed a lot of people. Even though they had some issues, but it was empty, unfortunately, and it hit in San Rafael de Flores community, and we kept it there as evidence that on the way they were trying to move the fuel with aircrafts, because they didn't want us to let them have the fuel. So there were many things that happened at that moment. We are there at the moment, but at the beginning, it was very difficult. We were attacked. They would send people to attack us verbally. We suffer hunger, the low temperatures, and the suffering of criminalized partners that the mine has involved us in. And there was a community divisions, of course. So at the moment we are organized with shifts, 24-hour shifts. We receive at 4 a.m. 4 p.m. for example. So today, for example, 4 p.m. and we finish tomorrow at 4 p.m. So instead of continue having the mine working, we were forced to have we had to had a blockade in the Constitutional Court in Guatemala. Never before in the history of Guatemala had there been a picket in front of the court, and we're demanding to create a sentence in our favor. It took them 9 months, but because we were there day and night, physically 24 hours a day, the court had produced a sentence where it stated that the mine was suspended until we, as indigenous people of the Shinga communities, were duly informed and that all information was understood by our communities. So now the sentence, and of course they talk about also the consultation of from the people. This sentence was produced on the 3rd of September 2018, and that was when the mine had to stop working. They canceled the operations. Then we began to have a dialogue table with the government, the business, the mining business, and the Shinga people. The government were asking from 2 authorities from the Shinga parliament, from by community, and we did not accept because we're 59 authorities. I am one of those, and my husband is also an authority in the parliament. And so the government accepted with 59 authorities. And with 59 people, we began to have a dialogue, discussions with the presidency and the business, and the Ministry of Energy and Mines. And it had continued working hand in hand. In the first meeting in our place, in the Shinga Parliament, we were having the meetings in our premises. The Vice Minister of Mines and Energy came afraid because she came here with a lot of security and police people, and we're not accustomed to having this amount of policemen, because that makes us nervous, because we are not used to having these people in our territories. So demanded that the next meeting she was asked not to take so many people in security, because they have said that we were an aggressive people. We are not an aggressive people. It is a people that we are empowered because we want to defend our territories, defend the water, the Mother Earth that is providing us with food to the table, that the trees, water sources that are getting drier with the mining companies. So they were afraid. No, of course we said no. We receive them in our home because we have because we are promoting a peaceful picket, and the vice minister, as he know more about the topic, began to say that he felt at home. They began with the negotiation table until they realized that there was a need to have some experts in the matter, biologists, archaeologists, and to let me tell you that in this dialogue table, we had also people from the Ministry of Culture and Sports. So we have some there are some areas in the mine, and the mine now put fences, and it's now saying that this is private property. But as ancestral peoples, they have to have a special ceremony, a yearly ceremony in some little mountains, because that is already secluded, or they have put fences there. The Ministry of Mining, the Ministry of Health, Culture and Sports, CONRED, the Energy and Mines. I don't know if there's another one, but 6 ministries. And the Shinga people. They had some studies with experts from Colombia. We didn't want to have to Guatemalans because our country is totally co-opted by corruption. And the studies that were produced by the Colombians that came here in our territory showed that all of the plans are wrong. There have been ministries that have produced some fake reports from their sleeves, but there are no serious studies like the ones that the Colombians did, because we worked with them. We took them to the places and to the communities, and we were working with them so that those studies could not be manipulated. And all the studies were wrong. And those studies were made known in a dialogue table with the government and the mine, and they were surprised. They even didn't know where that information came from. And the worst thing was that they acknowledged that the studies, the factibility studies were wrong, the ministers themselves. Now, we're in the process of information. We are happy because what started with a walk.
Un minutito para redondear y cerrar porque se te agotó el tiempo.
So we have one more minute.
Sí. Un minuto. Bueno. Personally,
I'd like to ask you, friends, to continue with this fight, because we have some. My house was shot with on the 23rd of April, 2021. We had been intimidated. We don't know where that comes from. We all blame the mining project. But we invite you to not to dismay and to continue. We have been working for 14 years. We have been fighting for 14 years. And just to finish, we are going to produce a report for the communities. We're going to have a plenary where all the communities are going to be present and they're going to vote if they want the mining project or no. And this is not going to be made with paper, but with the show of hands. That's where we are now.
Muchas gracias, Pati.
Thank you
También
very much,
recibimos
Patty.
nuestra
Please
solidaridad y
receive our
agradecimiento
solidarious
por
hug.
la presencia.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And we hope to have you here someday in
Para
Guatemala
fundirnos en un abrazo
so that we
solidario.
can
Yo
have
creo que
a
sobre
huge
esa
hug.
reivindicación que haces del
Also
derecho a la
because of a
información clara
vindication,
para
the
las
right of
comunidades,
the clear information for
no hay
communities,
defensa de
there is
territorio
no
posible sin
defense
garantías para
possible if there
defensores
is
y
no guarantee
defensoras,
for
sin acceso a
defenders
información clara,
without
sin
the access
posibilidades
to
de
clear
diálogo y
information
participación
or
con
possibilities
garantías.
of
Lo que ustedes
a
están haciendo desde su
participation in
experiencia
decision
y
making
resistencia,
from your
pues
resistant experience in Guatemala.
digamos, tristemente heroico, porque no
Sadly,
debería
it's
ser así, pero
heroic, but it
también
shouldn't be like
fuerte,
that,
lleno de
but happily
esperanzas
also
y
full of
nos
hope.
dan muchas
And
ideas
they
y
give us a lot
reflexiones de
of
qué es para la
ideas
defensa, la
for
coordinación, el diálogo,
action,
la
coordination,
persistencia,
dialogue,
la
persistence,
interlocución con la
interlocution with
institucionalidad
the
y sobre todo
institutions,
con
and
los
also
habitantes del
with the
territorio para
inhabitants in the
explicar qué
territory
sucede, por
to
qué lo
teach them or
hacemos,
to
por qué
make them know why
resistimos,
we're
porque es
doing
un
this, since
asunto
why
que
we
también
are
es de
resistance, why
interés, es
this is something that
de
concerns to them.
incumbencia. Así que nos das
So you
muchas
give us
ideas a
a lot
partir de
of
tu
very good
experiencia
ideas
para
regarding your
aprender con
experience to
ustedes
learn
qué lo
more from
hacen,
you,
cómo lo
why
hacen,
you're
cómo
doing this,
podemos
how you
también
do it, and how can we
mejorar prácticas de diálogo e
improve
interlocución.
dialogue
Y al igual
practices.
que lo comentaba Juan
And
Bay
as mentioned
también,
by Juan
la
Bay,
necesidad de
the
reconocer
need
los
to
derechos de los
acknowledge the
pueblos y
rights
reconocer a los pueblos en
and
estos
recognize the
procesos y los
peoples in
derechos
this
que tienen
process,
sobre sus
and
territorios
the
y su
people's
derecho a
rights on the
defender
territories
otros
and the
derechos.
right to defend
Así que
all the
Patti,
rights.
por
So,
favor,
Patty,
quédate con nosotros
thank
próximos
you
ratitos más.
very much.
Vamos
Please
a
stay with us
acabar
for a
con
moment,
nuestro
and we're going
tercer
to continue
capítulo del
with
día
our
de hoy,
third
nuestra
case
tercera
study today,
experiencia para
our
compartir y
third
aprender.
experience.
Así que le damos la bienvenida
So we
a
invite
Vanessa Torres,
Torres,
abogada ambientalista y
environmental
subdirectora de la
lawyer
organización
and vice
Ambiente y
director
Sociedad.
of
Vanessa,
the
bienvenida.
organization
Gracias por
Environment and
compartir con
Society.
nosotros
Thank you
este
very much,
espacio. Tiene
for
2
being
minutos
here
después
with
de
us.
que nuestros
So you have 20
anteriores
minutes as the other
interlocutores, así que
presenters.
pues el micrófono es
So the
tuyo.
microphone is
Adelante.
yours. Go ahead.
Angie, un gusto saludarles.
It is a pleasure to say hello to you.
A Christi por esta invitación tan
Thank you,
valiosa.
Patricia,
Creo
for
que
this valuable information,
siempre estos
because
espacios donde
these
podemos
spaces
compartir
where we
a
can
nivel de América
share
Latina,
at
del
the
Caribe
Latin
o de las
American level, the
diferentes
Caribbean, on
experiencias de
the different
defensa
experiences
del territorio y de
of
justicia pues también es
territories
valioso.
and environmental justice are
Por supuesto, agradecer
very
también a
valuable.
Patti
Also want to thank Patty
ay, disculpen que olvidé el nombre del
and,
otro colega
the
que
other
estaba
colleague
exponiendo, sí, gracias, a Juan sobre
on
los
the
tanto
cases.
y creo que precisamente en lo que
And
yo venía
precisely
reflexionando
what I
al
wanted to reflect
escucharlos
on when I
es
was
de
listening to you
cómo
is
instrumentos como el acuerdo
how
de Escazú vienen
instruments like the
a
Escazú Agreement
aportar
are
esas
here to
alternativas
provide alternatives
viables para la protección y
that are
defensa del
viable in the
ambiente.
protection of
Entonces,
environment.
en un primer escenario, yo
So in a
diría que
first
un
scenario,
concepto
I think
fundamental
of a fundamental
que de hecho
concept,
se crea en un plano
and
de
that in
derecho
fact is
internacional,
part of
que es la
international law,
democracia
which
ambiental.
is
Y se
environmental
cruza mucho con estos dos
democracy.
casos
And that
porque, digamos, desde la
is
academia se ha
a
asumido
cross
la
a cross
democracia
referred
ambiental
to
como ese
the,
escenario donde las políticas
environmental
públicas en materia ambiental
democracy,
tienen
particularly in
armonía con los
environmental management,
intereses de los
has
ciudadanos.
goes
Entonces,
together
cuando
with the
reflexionamos sobre si esto
interest of
ocurre o no
citizens.
ocurre
So if we
en la
reflect if
realidad,
this
en la
happens or
realidad
doesn't happen in
de
realities
la
or
protección
daily
del ambiente, pues
in the protection of
seguramente
environment,
tendremos muchas cosas por
then
decir.
we will
De
see
igual
that there are
forma,
many
al
things to be
hablar de
said.
democracia ambiental,
So when we're
también
talking
estamos
about
hablando
environmental defense, we are talking
de
about
que estas decisiones
that these
que se toman
decisions
en materia de
that
gestión
are
ambiental
made
estén sujetas a
regarding
discusión
environmental
social
rights
y a una
uh,
discusión pública
uh,
y política.
take us to a
Desafortunadamente,
social and
estos
political
otros
discussion.
escenarios que
Unfortunately,
podemos
these two
encontrar en la
scenarios,
práctica
what we
es que
find in the
cualquier
region
escenario
is
de
that
discusión
any
o
scenario for
de
discussion
postura crítica
or the
ante la
critical
forma en que se
positions
gestiona en los
regarding the
territorios
way
por
these
parte de las
mining companies are
organizaciones
affecting the
políticas latina y
territories
del Caribe
in
implica
Latin
muy
America and the
riesgos
Caribbean,
para quienes
generate
habitan los
risks
territorios
for those who
vulnerables.
inhabit the
Entonces,
territories.
por supuesto, este es
So
digamos, de reto al que nos
this
enfrentamos
is one of the
con la
challenges that we're
implementación del
facing
acuerdo de
with the
Escazú.
implementation of the Escazú
Como tú
Agreement.
lo mencionabas, Angie,
As
es
you mentioned,
importante revisar
Angie, it
cuáles
is
son
very
esos
important to
derechos que
remember
nosotros
that
tenemos
those
que
rights in the
fortalecer.
Escazú
Y digo
Agreement,
fortalecer
And the reason why I say strengthening is because in most of the regulations in Latin America and the Caribbean, there are some recognitions of the rights of environment, like the right of citizen participation and previous and informed consent. And this is a little bit that discussion that we have towards 2011. There was no a clear implementation of those rights. We have different cases in the region where we have regulations, specific regulations on access to information, but unfortunately, these are not implemented effectively. Like, for example, in Colombia, where we have the access to information, where there's specific regulation where it is clear to talk about transparency and responsibility of the state entities to communicate with the citizenship. When you take this to reality, this is only one example, but this happens in most of the countries in the region. When you really want to have quality information about a project, as we were talking about specific cases in Ecuador and Guatemala, it is really difficult to have access to that information. So what has been the process of environmental protection when you talk about assigning mining licenses or new oil projects? This information is delayed and and we have some issues in the implementation of the Escazú Agreement. Is that sometimes there are documents that are difficult to read. So in many cases, even though the communities know exactly their territories, with all this technical terminology, exploitation and others, they don't have to be understood. And when you have access to that information, they generate barriers to access to information, and they end up in social and environmental conflicts. Of course, we also have the case of citizen participation, where different countries in Latin America and the Caribbean are using different participation mechanisms, like a popular consultation. So they hear environmental hearings, but ideally they should be applied in the whole region, and that those decisions that are made within the framework of the implementation of those participation mechanisms could have a direct impact on their territories, which in fact is a discussion that we have had with the indigenous people for a long time regarding the reach and extent to when the ILO agreement, when they talk specifically about, but very important concept, which is the informed and previous consent. When we talk about decision making, this has to happen in the communities. So these examples that I'm giving you add up to the scenarios of the environmental justice, and in the Escazú Agreement, it was the most complex to regulate with the content of the treaty, because where there is much more conflict is in the tools that the judges have when they have to recognize or acknowledge rights that have been violated. And the reality shows that I mentioned some cases of examples of access to information that are not being implemented by institutions. What the citizen has left is the possibility of going to the legal scenarios through suing or a protection measure. And in many of those actions, they have winning situations where they recognize the request. But unfortunately, when you go to the implementation of those decisions, core decisions, something that happens constantly, those decisions are not implemented properly. And in many cases, they are ignored by the institutions. And so we have iconic cases in the region, like, for example, with the protection of certain rivers or some territories that are subject to rights. And when you see the implementation of those core decisions, we realize that they haven't had any significant advancement. So that should take us to reflect on one side towards how can we strengthen the scenarios previous to the legal level. And the second one is, what tools do judges have so that they can understand a holistic view of the environmental democracy and rights that comprise also the rights of defenders in the territories. In Escazú, from environmental justice, capacity building and training of judges is crucial in our attempts. And we have to think about the possibility of creating environmental courts, like in Chile, where there are two new environmental courts that are analyzing those cases in territories. And Escazú, what is bringing is that this has a lot of lessons learned, but it also brings us to the possibility to articulate the countries and the regions and to review how we can integrate these lessons learned in the regulations in our countries. Just give me a second, please.
Muy bien, mientras Vanessa regresa ya. Ya regresé.
Muchas
Thank you.
gracias.
I'm here.
Entonces, estaba mencionando el ejemplo de justicia
I was
ambiental.
giving
Creo
you the
que,
example of
el caso de la
environmental
formación de los
justice,
jueces es
and
fundamental y creo que
judge
vamos a
training
tener,
is
tener esta
essential.
oportunidad
And
mucho
we're going
más
to have an
de ser
opportunity
parte a favor de las
to have
comunidades
decisions
y
in favor
no
of the
tener solo
communities, but
simplemente
also to have decisions that are implemented in an effective manner. The second part is in the scenario of we are talking about the revision of effectiveness of citizen participation. What you mentioned before, what happened in Ecuador, and how close they were with the citizens when they were able to sensitize them on the importance of the Yasuní territories. This is one of the challenges that we face for those that were in the environmental defense. And it is that it's how to generate awareness of the common citizen that doesn't really care what is happening in Amazon because they are living in Bogota City, for example. This is a very complex scenario, and that also provides opportunities for different learnings. Maybe you have watched the news of the drought that are having the lack of rain in some areas in the Amazon because of the fires that are started by the big cities are already receiving terrible quality water and air because of those fires. And this puts us in a critical scenario. And that also gives us a possibility when people begin to see or to show some interest, to see the connection between the well-being of communities and the people who live there, and the well-being of the Moors and the inhabitants there. So when if there's connection, there is a shared responsibility. And the third scenario is there is the instrument that is the Escazú Agreement. As I mentioned before, we participated in the negotiation process since 2014. So we are immersed in this discussion and this agenda. And I just left in this moment a very fundamental point in this well-being and the critical situation of people who are environmental defenders in the region. Precisely, amidst the negotiations on the Escazú Agreement in 2018, actually, there was a very important moment when Berta Cáceres was killed, known by all of us. And this was a moment that was like a turning point, because within the 3 years of negotiations, we were there to raise our hands. So we said that, yeah, it's great that we are strengthening participation and justice. But as you mentioned, but I was mentioned by Juan and Patty, demanding respect and the fulfillment of this right has meant the killing of many people in the regions. They have also been affected by their own tranquility and the threats that they have to face. So we need to associate the rights of nature with the rights of environmental defenders. And so the fourth pillar is the protection of environmental defenders. In the critical situation in America and the Caribbean, this should be a core aspect in the whole region, because this becomes into a real alternative where states have to guarantee the security and the proper places or safe places for the defense of environment in the region.
Y adicionalmente,
And additionally,
en la discusión que se tuvo
in
en
the
el
discussion
espacio
that we had in the
el
negotiation
objetivo era
space,
empezar a reconocer
the
estos
ultimate
enfoques
goal
como
was to begin to
protección
recognize
o
these protection
llamándolo
measures,
también desde el
or as we
derecho,
call them,
mecanismos de autoprotección
mechanisms
que
for
han impulsado
self-protection that
históricamente
have
las
been
comunidades étnicas y
projecting,
las comunidades
being
de
projected by the communities and the local
Caribe,
communities in Latin America and the
precisamente por
Caribbean,
un escenario de
precisely
abandono
because of
estatal en los
a
diferentes
case of
territorios
state abandonment in the territories, in the
biodiversos.
biodiversity territories.
Entonces, digamos, llega este
So
cuarto pilar. Yo
this
creo
is the
que
fourth
en este
pillar.
momento estamos en un
In
punto
this
muy
moment, we are
importante,
in a very
no
key
solamente por el
moment
reconocimiento de
because
las
not only
demandas
because of the
sociales,
recognition of
como
the
es el caso
social
de
fights,
Yasuní,
as in the
que
case of
fue, como
Yasuní, which
mencionaba
is
antes, un hito regional a nivel
really a
mundial,
turning point at the world
el
level.
escenario del acuerdo
But
de
the
Escazú llegó
scenario
en
of the
esta segunda
Escazú Agreement
conferencia.
is connected
Hay que mencionar
with
que
these
en la
fights.
última conferencia de
It is
Harmonious
important to clarify
se
that in
aprobó
the
el primer
last
plan de
COP,
acción para personas
the first
vulneradas en
action
materia de derechos
for human rights
humanos
defenders was
ya debe estar
mentioned.
siendo implementado por los
This has to
estados
be
partes.
implemented by
Ecuador es
states,
estado
party
parte del
states.
acuerdo de Escazú,
Ecuador
entonces
is part of
sería muy
the
importante
Escazú
conocer
Agreement,
cuál es
so it will be
el
very
nivel de
interesting to see what is the
implementación
level of
política que se está
implementation and
teniendo
planning
para garantizar este
to
plan de acción.
guarantee
Un
this
plan de
action plan.
acción donde
An action
asumimos
plan
escenarios de
where we
reconocimiento de las
recognize
personas defensoras y
the
de
acknowledge
la
of the
diferencia
human
entre
rights and
género.
environmental
Este plan
defenders,
fue,
and
no
also
queremos un
we don't
reconocimiento
want
ya
to have
como
a
libre
recognition
solo
on
la
when
defensora
the
sin
defender
asesinar, ¿no?
has been
Que es
killed,
como un
because that
escenario
is
muy común
like a
donde se
very
reconoce
common
a premios
scenario
y se
where
reconoce
we
si se
receive a
asesina.
special
Y
prize
bueno,
or
yo
have a
creo que el
special
escenario
celebration or
más
homage.
útil es la
These
protección
there are
antes de que
there are
ocurra
more
un
useful
suceso como
scenarios, like for
este.
example, protection
Ese es un poco
scenarios.
el llamado que
This
se
is
hace
more or
desde
less
el
the
plan de
call that
acción
we're
en temas de
making from
reconocimiento, en
the
temas de
idea of recognition
recaudación frente a quién
in
tiene
terms
como
of
persona defensora de
capacity
la vida, como
building
algo
of
muy
what
llamado
is an
no es
environmental
tan claro
defender.
qué se entiende por
Sometimes it's not
defensa de la
clear
vida
what
y
is
del medio. Y
a human right
esta
defender,
definición
an environmental defender.
está amparada por
And
otros
this is being also
mecanismos
protected by
de derechos
other
nacionales, como la
international law
Resolución de las Naciones
mechanisms, such
Unidas
as the
sobre
United
la definición
Nations
del
resolutions,
ambiente,
where they
y donde,
give
por ejemplo,
the
se
definition
reconoce la
of
relación directa
environment, and they
entre los
recognize the
grupos
direct
étnicos
relationship
y la
between the ethnic
vulnerabilidad
groups
por
and the
el cambio climático,
vulnerability
precisamente
because
porque,
of
como
climate
lo
change.
mencionaba
Precisely because, as I was
Juan,
mentioned by Patty and Juan,
existe un vínculo
there is
directo
a linkage
entre la
between
comunidad y el individuo y el
communities and
territorio. O sea, no
individuals
hay
and the
una
territories.
diferenciación
So
entre
there
unos
is
y
no
otros
really
y es
differentiation amongst
distinto a
them.
como
And this is
nosotros
different from the
vemos
way
el
we
territorio.
have seen the
Entonces,
territory.
ya existe esta definición
So
y debe
this
ser
definition is already
incorporada
included and it has to be
en las diferentes
incorporated in the
discusiones
different
e implementación de
discussions
política
and in
pública.
implementation of
Y
public
finalmente,
policies.
ya me
So
quedan pocos
finally, I know
minutos
that we
para
have 4
mencionar, por
minutes. I just
supuesto,
wanted to
el
mention, of
escenario de
course,
lucha que dimos en
the
Colombia.
fight scenario that we gave in
Recientemente,
Colombia
hace unas
recently.
semanitas,
2 weeks
la
ago,
maravillosa
we
noticia
had
que
the marvelous
finalizamos el proceso de
news that we
ratificación del
finalized
acuerdo
the
de Escazú.
ratification of the
Fue una lucha
agreement.
de
It was
7
a
años
fight of 7 years
liderada por la Alianza por
led
el
by
Acuerdo de
the
Escazú, de la
Alliance
cual
for the Escazú
hacemos
Agreement,
parte junto con
where
otras
our organization
organizaciones
is part, with other organizations at
como
the national level,
WWF, de
with
justicia,
WWF and Red Justice
Movimiento
and
Nacional Ambientalista,
the
las universidades
Environmental National
Rosario, Universidad
Movement,
de los Andes.
Rosario University
Y
and the
digamos
Andes
que el
University.
compromiso por parte
And the
nuestra fue
compromise that we had on
primero
our side
posicionar
was first
y
to
entender,
position and
digamos, que la
understand
comunidad
uh,
y el escenario de construcción
the
local
scenario of the
entendiera
local
la
construction,
importancia del Acuerdo de
could
Escazú.
understand the
Esto
importance
es
of the
algo que
Escazú
debemos
Agreement.
seguir construyendo
It
no
is something
solamente
that we
en
need to
Colombia,
continue
sino en toda la
building
región.
because
Seguir
still, not only Colombia, but in the whole
capacitando y
region, we need to
socializando el
continue
contenido
training
implicado
and
y tratando incorporados
making known
dentro de
this
las estrategias,
agreement so that
planes
they can
territoriales
incorporate it
y
in
escenarios,
plans
digamos, de construcción
of
local.
local construction.
Y por supuesto,
And of course,
el reto que viene ahora
the
después
challenge that we have
del pase por el Congreso,
after passing
finalmente la
through the
discusión que se tuvo
Congress
en la
and
Corte
the
Constitucional,
discussion in the Constitutional
el
Court
espacio de
is
implementación.
the
Un
space for
espacio de
implementation.
implementación donde
Space for
actores
implementation
como
that
tradicional,
actors and
desafortunadamente
decision
son
makers
generadores de
that
conflictos
unfortunately
socioambientales,
are
como lo es el
people who
Estado, como lo
generate
es el sector
conflicts
privado,
like the
deben
state
estar
and the
incluidos dentro de
private
esta discusión.
sector have to be
Debemos
included
poner
in the
sobre la
discussion.
mesa y
We
vamos a
need to
hablar
put on the table, and we're going to be
específicamente de
talking
temas de
specifically
protección de personas
about
defensoras,
the
cuál es la
protection of human
responsabilidad de estos
rights
actores
and
frente
environment,
a la
which is the
inseguridad y a los
responsibility
escenarios
facing
críticos
the
que se viven también
insecurity
en
and
esta
the
región,
critical situations that they
plantear
live
escenarios
experience
de
in the
apoyo y
biodiverse
mecanismos de
territories,
autoprotección que
and which
habiliten
are
y
the
defiendan a las comunidades locales
collective and
y
individual
por supuesto cuáles son las
protection
políticas
mechanisms,
públicas que se
and
implementen
any public
en materia de
policy that can
protección
be
tanto de la vida
built
como
around
de
this, both in
recuperación.
environment with
Muchísimas
environmental
gracias defenders, they at least have to guarantee the participation of these people. So we need to stop having the protection protocols and mechanisms created from offices in capital cities where they do not understand the background of a transformation of the territories and the defense of the environment. So with no doubt, this general summary was to show you the importance of the scenario that we are experiencing at the moment, which is a scenario of different challenges, because politically we have a very interesting moment, but also a very complicated moment, because but now we have these movements led by the citizenship, so that we can continue working with democracy and environmental defense. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you very much. It's always good to listen to you and to share with you those clear points about the opportunity windows that we have and how these vindications of indigenous peoples and defenders of environment can encounter a space of like an oxygen space for advocacy and tools and instruments that can help them deepen into these pillars that the agreement is vindicating: access to information, access to participation, access to justice, the right to defend rights with guarantees for human and environmental right defenders. You give us very good points. We will continue embracing all the comments that you have given us and strengthening this framework that you have given us, that we can continue promoting from that democratic and environmental window that Escazú is opening. Because democracy will be environmental or will not be democracy. And the region has this very clear. So now I give back to Alejandro for the closing from Christi, to be able to close this encounter in these 3 minutes that we have left to close. We're also thanking Patty, Vanessa, and Juan for your valuable learning points that you have shared today. So Alejandro, go ahead, please.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Angie. I'd like to thank you, Juan, Patricia, and Vanessa for their participation. I'm going to read some comments here today. Alirio says, it's a great encounter. It makes us go deeper into our hearts and our hope. In practice, how can we articulate Escazú with due diligence the treatment of abandonment of fossil fuels? Can we create a regulation framework for the defense of life and territories in our common house? It's a very interesting question that I would invite Vanessa probably to tell us a little bit more about this on this question. Juan Bay, what learning points did you get from the summit of the Guarani people? And then Aida, and then Patricia, how can we be persistent in a fight like such a long time like the one you have experienced for Vanessa? Sorry, for Patty. Vanessa, I don't know if you can take this first question from Alirio. How can we articulate Escazú with due diligence with a treaty of abandoning fossil fuels within the framework of biodiversity regarding the COP16, and if it is possible to create regulation framework for the defense of territories of our shared home? Lirio, thank you very much for the question. It is a very wide question. I'm going to try to respond in the best way possible. So I think that Escazú is a treaty that, when it includes the different parts that have to do with the construction of environmental democracy, allows us. I'm sorry, I'm not going to buy the camera because I left the office. So I'm going to respond without camera. Sorry. So from the building of a scenario of the Escazú government, the call was made to include all the actors that participate in the environmental democracy. This includes a private sector. It is fundamental to implement, to include the private sector as a responsible sector. We know that the construction of the agreement on human rights has been a huge challenge with the international agenda, where many organizations have made incredible efforts to be able to technical documents and agreements regarding the responsibility of businesses and the respect for human rights. But we continue having scenarios that of isolation of this responsibility for the companies. So the Escazú Agreement opens that possibility of adding up to the private sector as an active actor, understanding what are the obligations of the states to guarantee access rights. And this takes us to prevention of conflict based on environmental issues. And this is probably one of the most important contributions of the Escazú Agreement in the construction or the implementation of these policies in business and human rights. I think that they are very articulated with the scenario of the Escazú Agreement. And this is the discussion that has to be given in the COP16. In the second part, as you mentioned, of COP on biodiversity. Of course, for the organizations in Colombia, it is a priority agenda. Colombia is going to take over the presidency of COP on October in Cali. And precisely as an organization of civil society, we have been promoting the connection between the global biodiversity goals and the environmental protection agenda, particularly with the Escazú, and the relationship that is very interesting, and is the Target 22 that has to do with the need to guarantee protection of territories and by diverse territories through protection of human rights and environment. And this Target 22 talks about citizen participation. They talk about access to effective information. So this is going to be a very interesting that we're going to have in October. There is an agenda already built with different organizations at the international level to talk about the protection of environmental defenders within the framework of biodiversity agenda. And it is also important to mention that Colombia is promoting two declarations that are going to be discussed in the space of negotiation. The first one is specifically talking about the meaning of peace with nature. Remember that this is going to be like the slogan of Colombia in the COP presidency. And what is understood by nature, which is together with the consultation that you're making. So peace with nature is basically conserved territories that are inhabited by local communities. This is goes beyond territories that are not inhabited. So biodiverse territories are very inhabited by ethnic and local communities that came to those territories because of different violence dynamic in the region. And I also communities that promote more sustainable ways of protecting those territories that unfortunately have not been heard and have not been supported in this scenario of conservation. And that's basically the idea of peace with nature, to acknowledge the existence of those communities. And then we move on to the next level, and this is when we articulate the content with the Escazú. And it is that, unfortunately, there are communities that are facing illegal actors. They talk about local, they confront local situations, and we need to talk about protection and guarantee of the rights. So with no doubt, I think that we are in an opportunity window for the international agendas where Latin America and the Caribbean are the protagonist regions. And the COP next year is going to be in Brazil. So the challenge that we have as citizenship is to find spaces like this to continue to articulate and continue knitting and to continue having a critical voice regarding the implementation of the environmental agenda in the scenario of public policies. Thank you very much.
Perfecto, Vanessa, muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Vanessa. Juan Bay had to disconnect because of a meeting, and Patricia has had some issues connecting. So we are going to thank you again, and to share some key messages from this conversation for today. The first one is that if, in fact, sensible environments like the Amazons and the Mesoamerican diversity and the planet itself are inhabited, are taken care of by originary ancestral peoples, indigenous, Afro-descendants, and peasants that have rich connection with harmony in nature, in the model of food production. To guarantee these connections is vital to be able to face climate change. And this is something that has been mentioned by Vanessa and Juan, are not only from the demands of the communities, but also by the policies that have been implemented and we're trying to promote to guarantee these rights.
Patricia, volviste.
Patricia, you're here.
Ahí te voy a dar la palabra para responder la pregunta.
So there is a question for you. I don't know if how have you been able to continue working for such a long time, Patricia? The conviction that we have that we're defending our territories. The business itself asked that question. How have we been able to survive as a movement in our resistance, in our fight? They think that somebody is providing or giving like sponsoring our fight, but here we just do it with our own means because we are convinced that that this is a duty with our territories and defending this common home. Thank you very much, Patricia. Okay, yeah. We have to continue fighting and for the resistance and the care of life, which has been difficult and very important. And it is difficult because economically, for example, it is affecting. I am a housewife. My husband is a farmer, and to be able to move to the place where the residence is, we need, when we have our shift, we need to invest around 400 quetzales, more than $50 for those of you who manage dollars. So it's the conviction. We love our territory. Even Pope Francisco mentioned in the Laudato Si that we have to defend the common home. That is why we're here. We are tired. I feel tired. But since we're on the final stage, we're going to continue a little bit more, doing a little bit more. But I feel that it's about time. It's time, because we're getting tired. Because this has been 14 years now. A huge hug, a solitarious hug for resistance. And it is so important to keep your memories of memoirs of the importance of, that we need to keep in mind the importance of those territories and all the achievements that you have had so that you can share these achievements with other communities. And this principle of the care for life is sustaining the chain. And just as a conclusion, as a final message, the importance of guaranteeing this interconnection or linkages, the vital linkages between ecosystems and the communities that inhabit them, and the importance of determining that these ecosystems are at risk because of this desire of businesses that promote an uncontrolled consumption in a world that is basically using the resources. Protecting these ecosystems takes us to guarantee directly the protections of the people that inhabit them. Strengthening environmental democracy is the road to make a proper management of social environmental conflicts, guaranteeing access to participation, to information, and to environmental justice. Vanessa shared a very interesting reflection that we have been able to have advocacy to create environmental courts and also to talk to the judges and for the protection of rivers and ecosystems and the rights of ordinary people, that sometimes those decisions of court decisions are not implemented. So how can we harmonize the work that we're doing in this sense So the implementation really takes place in a fair and correct manner. That these international frameworks that we mentioned in these times of transition, like the due diligence legislation, the United Nations guiding principles on human rights and businesses, actually takes us to the protection of people's nature, and in that sense, the wider human rights of nature. And just to close, a very specific invitation to protect defenders of the environment. This has been a very critical situation. We continue being one of the most dangerous regions in the world, and where more defenders have been killed or threatened when they are defending their territories and their territories. But related to the environment, it is important to raise the voice, to be solidarious, and to continue the pedagogy of the importance of those people who take over the service work of protecting the environment for many years. We need to strengthen them and embrace them, and to raise our voice in the community defense of the territories. Thank you very much for participation, and we will wait for you in the next webinar, in the sixth session, which is going to be on the 20th of October, 25th of October, within the framework of COP16.